Everyone, and welcome to the channel. And today on the channel I'm going to be talking about a new drama horror film called Repulse that is now premiering on the Brooklyn Horror Film Festival. This film is a Czech horror film and is supposedly the most darkest and disturbing Czech horror film ever made. Does that live up to its name? Find out next in my review. Repulse is directed by Emil Kriska, and the actors and actresses' names are really hard to pronounce, so I'm just going to put them in the description. There's not an actual plot synopsis actually online that I can actually read to you guys, so I'll go ahead and just tell you that this film is two separate stories. You have a couple, Robert and Katarina. They are not really getting along too well as Robert is an abuser and beats his wife, and you have a mother and son, and they've kidnapped this woman, and that's really the basic two plots of this film. So what do I have to really say about this film? This film, it's kind of a strange film, and I say that because this film doesn't have a lot of dialogue. It takes about 12 minutes before we get any dialogue in this film, and I think a lot of the dialogue in this film, it's very stiff. The characters, they're very nonchalant with their roles. I never really got behind any character in this film. I will say that the actual stronger story of the wife and husband actually having a really bad marriage was probably the most interesting out of the two stories. The second story with the whole mom and son, I really felt that that story really didn't really grow too much. They kidnapped this woman, they're holding her hostage. I have no clue why. The son, he is mentally retarded. He gets very frustrated easily. And there really isn't much of a plot with his character, really. He really doesn't speak at all. The mother, she barely has any lines in here, and she's doing drugs in here. And really, there isn't too much of a plot really going on with that side story. And it was really hard to really get into that story. I had a lot more questions with the mother and son rather than really actually following the plot, because there's a lot of pushing back of past and present. And the film doesn't start off that well of really explaining too much. It starts more so in the future, and then it rewinds itself back. And we get a little bit of mix of the past and present between both stories. Elaborating more so on both these plots, now they do actually connect, and I'm not going to say how they connect to avoid spoilers, but I had a lot more questions with the mother and son because I don't really understand why they kidnapped this girl. And I didn't understand the relationship between the mother and the son because she wants him to do certain things, but we really don't know what she wants him to do. And she'll find ways to punish him and really tick him off. And there isn't a lot of dialogue exchange between both characters. They'll walk around and they'll have these chicken masks on and a sheep mask. And I have no clue why, because it's not like they're sacrificing anybody or a part of any cult or gang or anything like that. So I didn't understand that aspect. And elaborating on the fact that I said that the acting is actually stiff in this, there is one scene where Robert, he finds out that his wife is actually cheating on him, and after he finds out, he actually takes a bunch of trash and he dumps it into the actual guy's car, and the guy comes at him and they start having a fight, but there's no emotion between the fight. There's a couple punches, a couple kicks. Robert falls down to the ground and the guy drives away. There is absolutely no emotion within the fight, and that's a great example as to how the acting in this film is. There's no emotion with it. It's really hard for the audience to really get into the acting or really feel like there's any characterization within this film. If I really had to give any praise for this film, I would say that I think that the camera work is done pretty well. I don't think that the camera, there's no shaky cam or anything like that. I think it's focused. I think that most of the actual camera work and shots, they're done pretty well. I really can't complain about that. And I would say that I was genuinely at least somewhat interested in the actual couple story as to what was going to happen with the fact that this woman actually cheated on her husband. I was genuinely interested. I will say though, once we get the actual intertwining of both stories together, it felt a little lackluster, and it felt like when they actually tied them together, it felt like the person that was responsible for this intertwining, it was kind of their fault anyway. And it is a little bit, I would say, a little bit of movie magic in a way of what happens next at that point, because once it gets to that next point, it's just like, but why are you doing that? And by the time we get a wrap up of the couple's story, which I think wraps up pretty well, decently, I would say. But the whole story with the actual son and the mother, that story, it's a little bit underwhelming, I would say. And I don't really feel like we get too much closure. There's a little bit, but not enough. I just find it overall really hard to really get into this movie as a whole. There isn't really a lot of rewatchability for this film for me, and I just felt like we needed a little bit more out of definitely the second story between the mother and the son. I think the original story with just the couple is okay enough, but I just feel like the acting is not there, so it's really hard to get emotionally invested. Although the story does make sense, I will say, and I didn't have as many questions with that story as I did with the mother and the son. So that's why I'm going to give a score of this film a 1.5 out of 5. It just needed a little bit more work, I think. I think it needed a lot better characterization and a little bit more to keep me interested in the film. And I think a little bit more dialogue, too. I think there's just too many times where it's silence. There's not a lot of score, really, with the film. There'll be a few little tense little moments with the score, but I don't really know why we have that tense score because there isn't anything too intense. Those are my thoughts on this film. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys on my next one.